You're listening to Let's Talk About Fatherlessness with host Sean Teis, where we talk about leading fatherless families to the Heavenly Father.
Hey, I'm Sean Teis, and this is Let's Talk About Fatherlessness. I'm excited to have Pastor Dave Huston with us today. Hey, it's great to have you, Pastor Dave.
Good to be here.
Pastor Dave is not just a pastor friend that we have a lot of pastor friends on here, and we're thankful for them. Pastor Dave was my youth pastor, and so I'm excited to have him on with us to talk about fatherlessness and to discuss not just my journey, but also the journey of others that he's worked with, and maybe even share a little bit about his story of how he grew up. I know he went through different things as a teenager as well with his mom and things like that. So why don't we just go ahead and have you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us about yourself.
Okay. First of all, I have to say, Sean was a punk, an annoying punk.
We all are as teenagers to a point.
uh, my name's Dave Huston. I grew up not in a pastor's home. My dad was just one of those faithful church members and deacons, and it was one of those things. When the church doors were open, we were always there. But when I was I was 17, around 17, my mom started having some issues. And long story short, when July 28th, 1983, my mom passed away from cancer. And we just found out 2 months before that. The doctor said they went to do surgery. They said she has 2 months to live. And then she's going to die. And that's exactly what happened. And so I know people were concerned about me, and probably rightly so. And so, it was one of those things. How is he going to respond? I have an older brother and older sister. I was still at home. And I would say I did okay, but I did some struggling. A couple years later, my dad got remarried, and my stepmom, I just got to say it, I hated her. At first, I thought it was cool because, hey, now there's this other person to spend time with my dad, and but I hated her. And when I graduated from high school, maybe I should go back a little bit. When I was in junior high, God called me to preach, and I did not want to preach at all. No way. I just knew those guys had no fun. I thought their jammies had ties on them because, a preacher, you never wore jeans or didn't do any fun stuff, didn't play sports, all the stuff I like to do. And so I'm like, nope, not doing that. And I was just telling somebody the other day, I remember I was in a field at my dad's farm, and my plan for my life was to be a farmer. And so I was in this one field, and it was probably 1983, 84. And I said, okay, God, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to buy this farm. I'm going to be a farmer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with kids in trouble with the law. I'll bring them here to my farm, and I'll work them and tell them about you, and everything will be good in the hood. And so I was running from God. And it's interesting how I was telling the Lord how my life should be. But when it came down with my stepmom, I grew up on a farm. I was raised to be responsible. I mean, I ran equipment that could kill you. And then my stepmom comes in when I'm 19 years old, treating me like I'm like 14. She had never had children of her own. And so it was terrible. So long story short, I went to college. And the reason was, actually, there are three reasons I went to college. I hated my stepmom. The college, when I went to visit, there were pretty girls there, and I could play sports. Those were the three reasons that I went to college. And I'm not very spiritual, but God used that in my life. And went to college. God started working on my heart. I came home one of the breaks and apologized to my dad and my stepmom. And I will say, I loved my stepmom has passed away. I loved my stepmom. Plenty of times I didn't like her a whole lot. So, when it comes to these kids, when they have a stepmom, a step parent, I get it. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes you just can't stand them. But I did love her, and I forgave her. Now, another thing, there was sometimes some bitterness, and I won't go into a whole bunch of stuff, but there's some bitterness that starts to creep up with her. some things we found out after she passed away. But it's a choice to forgive. And so I go to college, God works on my heart. And I thought, I kind of submitted to God in steps. I went and took a youth ministries major because I thought, those guys have fun. They get paid to have fun. So I surrendered to be a youth pastor first. And then I thought, I'd like to do camp work too. But then I started late college because I wasn't going to college. It was a couple years before I went. I got married for my senior year. God used my wife in amazing ways in my life. But in November of my senior year of college, here I am, a Bible major, youth ministries major. And it was November. I walked out the backyard of this house we were renting. And I finally said, okay, God, if you want me to be a senior pastor, I'll do that. And so that was finally all those years, probably 10 years or more that I ran from God. And so God, eventually I was youth pastor. I came to Blair County Christian School where Sean went to school. And I was a teacher for 2 years. Then I went to be a youth pastor in Tennessee for 3. And God gave me my family there. We adopted 5 children. And we went from 0 children to 5 in one day. And they were 5, almost 4, almost 3, almost 2, and 12 weeks when we got them. And then God brought us back here to central Pennsylvania to Foot 10 again. And we came in 1997, September of 97, to be youth pastor. And that's when I met Sean. And I knew his older brother before that when I was there teaching earlier. And I became youth pastor, was youth pastor for 3 years. Then in 2000, I became senior pastor at Foot of 10, been the senior pastor since then. But something that's interesting, in my entire ministry, God has always let me work with teenagers in some way or another. I had finished my sophomore year of college. I started working in a youth group, big youth group there, about 150 kids. I got to work with them, taught a high school boys Sunday school class. And from that point on, so 1988 probably, all the way through, I have had some type of ministry with teenagers, and I love it.
That's great. And
that's kind of a quickie there.
Yeah, that's good. And I appreciate you sharing that and the transparency there of, the things you went through. Do you think that you growing up and having that with your mom passing away at 17, do you think that helped you relate to teenagers? I mean, obviously you do, but expound on that a little more.
Yeah, I do. Because there are situations where I can talk to a teenager and say, look, I may not have been through your exact situation, but I've experienced loss. I've experienced a step parent, some things like that. And then one other thing that I need to mention to you that it was crucial to me. Through this whole time, there was a guy that was in my school. Man, the impact he had on my life. His name's Coach Wood. And I learned a lot from him through sports. Boy, I could sense myself tearing up on this one. We found out, Mom was the church secretary. She played piano. And after we found out about that she only had 2 months to live, they were going to announce it to the church. And I was sitting towards the back with my friends. And my one buddy that was sitting right on the aisleway, he got up for some reason. God had him get up. And I knew that the pastor was going to get up and announce to the church that that Mom only had a couple months to live. And when the pastor got up to announce it, Coach Wood came in and sat down next to me. He never said a word. He put his arm around me and held my shoulders. And he sat there like that for the entire time they made the announcement. And then after that, I think they were getting ready to sing a song, or it was going to be the offering pretty quick. And he was one of the ushers. And so Coach just sat there with his arm around me. And then he sat there, and it was time for him to get up and go. He gave one more squeeze, stood up, and walked out. That meant more to me than anything anybody did through me losing my mom.
Yeah.
And that was just huge. So, if you're somebody that works with teenagers or works with kids and they're going through a tragedy, and I'm just as guilty as the next guy, when you think you just got to talk, sometimes just shut up
Yeah.
and be there for them. I'm telling you, what coach did to me for me that was, I mean, still, I was 17 and I'm 58 right now. That was a long time ago, and that still makes me tear up when I think about how he impacted my life.
Yeah, and that's so powerful because I think people will overcomplicate this issue of mentoring and impacting youth. And sometimes it does get really messy and it can be really challenging, but sometimes it's just putting your arm around them and saying, "Hey, I'm here for you," or not even saying anything like you said. And so I think that that's really helpful. And I sometimes people think that, hey, I have to have gone through it myself. And I know you went through it, I went through it, but if you're listening to this, you don't have to have gone through something in order to care for somebody. You could put your arm around them and help them with that. Now, going back to you, you moved there when I was in seventh grade, and that's what I wanted to definitely want to talk to you about because there was rumors of this Mr. Huston guy coming back to Blair County Christian School, foot of 10. You were a teacher there at the school. Now you were coming back as a youth pastor, and we needed a youth pastor. And so I was excited. I didn't have any idea who you were. I was just this crazy seventh grader that just was getting in trouble all the time. And we had a Bible teacher for our Bible class, and I didn't like him. None of the kids liked him, and we knew you were going to take over our class. And I remember writing on my book, "Mr. Huston, save us." I remember I wrote that down, and because the class was so terrible and boring. And my sister said you were good people, so I believed her. She was kind of my leader, and so I'm like, okay, I trust April. And some reason she thought you guys were amazing. I don't know. She met you. She met you. I don't even remember meeting you guys. I guess you came and candidated, and I didn't remember that, but she thought you guys were incredible. And I was just oblivious to reality, I guess, in seventh grade. And so she said, these people are going to be great. I'm like, okay, April says they're going to be great. So I believe her. And the little brother syndrome, right? And so I said, okay, yeah, I'll believe you. And you guys showed up and you guys impacted my life. And just by being present and inviting us into your life and you, like you said, you had 5 small children. How old were they again?
When we got them, they were 5, almost 4, almost 3, almost 2, and 12 weeks. When we came there, they were probably 6. Mike was 6, 5, 4, 3, 1, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you still took time to care for my sister and I and all the youth group. I mean, you tried to work with them, but you would do special things with us. Now, what was the intentionality there with us? I know you invite us to your house and stuff, but looking at the background of it, do you remember? I mean, I know it was a long time ago, and I joked with you about if you remember, but do you remember the intentionality as a youth pastor saying, "Hey, let's focus on these kids"?
No, I don't remember the specifics, except that I look in looking back in all these years, God has always drawn me to the rascal. That's that was you. I always, I don't avoid any teenager. I love kids. But I've always, and I was a rascal as a kid. I have always been drawn to the more rough, I guess now in our terminology today, the traumatized kid. I always have. And that's just, so I can't say that's anything. Look how wonderful that's what God built me to do.
Yeah. So what did you guys do intentionally though? I mean, because you invited us to your house. I mean, we would go along with you to just come over and hang out. I mean, you remember Miss Beth Ann making elephant ears. I remember just watching movies at your house. We went along with you on a couple small trips. What was the intentionality there? Somebody listening, so for somebody that's a youth pastor now, or there's somebody that's working with teenagers, what would you say to them? With what you did for me, how, what did you do intentionally? To make sure that you impacted our life.
Well, and see, there's part of that is intentionality. You've got to make sure you're ministering to the family God's given you also.
Yeah.
And so ministering to your wife and your kids. But also it was just one of those things. See, as you're talking about intentionality, I just tried to follow God because I can't say, oh, well, I read this book and I did. It was just like God's going, here, invite them over. have that, just like Coach Wood, when he came up and put his arm around me. I don't think there weren't the books out then that there are now. It was just, I really believe God tapped him on the shoulder and said, go sit with him, put your arm around that kid.
Yeah.
And so with you guys, I've been drawn to the Rascal. I knew, the single mom home you were in, and God just drew me to you guys. And it was like, here, have them over. And I guess also I should say, my dad and mom, there was a girl, I remember, she was a lot older than me. She was the age of my sister. She used to go on trips with us, and they'd have her over to the house a lot. And she was from a really rough family. I think her dad was like a major drunk. And so she had a really, really rough home life. And mom and dad just made her like a part of our family. So I grew up that way. And then God just kept sending. So, a youth pastor, just be sensitive to God. And sometimes we get so focused on ourselves and God, I hate to say it, but numbers and what does the other local youth pastor or the other pastor think of me? You know what? Throw that out the window. We need to please God and just let God lead you one step at a time. And something that just recently I've been telling our teenagers, because Sean, but our youth pastor of 9 years, God moved him. Nothing bad. I still love him to death, but we don't have a youth pastor right now. So I've been working with the teens, which I love. And I've been telling the teens, hey, start to asking each other, how's your walk with God? How's your walk with God? Well, then I realized I wasn't doing it. And this one night I'm sitting with my wife, and this teenage girl texts me and was asking me a question. And it was like the Lord said, ask her how her walk with me is. So I text her, how's your walk with God? And she sent back, it's pretty distant right now. And I'm like, man, I mean, cool. Not that she was distant with God, but God told me to do that. Then, oh man, 3 or 4 days later, she texted me again and said, Pastor Dave, yesterday I turned the radio on and there was a song. I think it's called Jesus at a Distance. And she said, that really spoke to my heart. And here, God just told me to text her, how's your walk with God? And then he had her turn a radio on at just the right time to this song, Jesus at a Distance. And in that, it's talking about being close enough to the fire to feel some warmth, but far enough away to hide, something along that line. And I'm just going, wow. And so I can't overstress enough, just obey God. As I look back, what was the intentionality of having you guys over, other than God going, hey, have that knucklehead come over to your house? That's, that, I mean, you can't write a book on what I'm saying, but,
yeah. Being sensitive to the Holy Spirit's leading. I mean, really, I think that comes down to in ministry. So, and sometimes we suppress that because there is that kid that we're like, hey, I don't really want to work with him. But God's telling us, go spend time with that kid, even though they are annoying or they aren't somebody you'd want to be around all the time. But we have to, and we have to work with this. And I'm saying the same as you, probably because, you worked with me. I'm the same. I go after the kids that are, usually people don't want to be around, and they don't want to. That's the ones I like to work with. I like to work with all kids. I mean, honestly, I love teenagers, and I think that once you're a youth pastor, you're always a youth pastor at heart. And that's you, right? you love being a youth, and I do too. I love teenagers. I love working with them. It's so fun. But sometimes there is that kid, that little rascal that in the youth group that some people shy away against. I just did an interview right before this one with a guy that he said that people were telling him he was going to get locked up and stuff because he had anger issues and behavioral issues, and his mom dealt with depression and things like that. And so, but people were just kind of going to throw him away. And, I even worked with a teenager recently where this person told his mom, hey, he's going to go to juvie, and just saying, hey, look, we're going to throw this kid away. And I think changing that mindset, saying, how can we help this kid? Right. And what I love about what you're saying is you just invited us into your life. I think we overcomplicate fatherless ministry with teenagers where we like, hey, it has to be a program. It has to be this formal program where we do this formal big brothers, big sisters type thing, which those things are good. They can work, but it doesn't have to be that, right? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Absolutely. Just uh, love them right where they are.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't. And here's the deal: teenagers are some of the biggest hypocrites that walk the face of the earth, but they can spot hypocrisy from miles away.
Yeah.
So quit trying to act all whatever like you're some Superman or whatever, and just be real. Love those kids right where they are. And you know what, if you don't love teenagers, you better question your calling. I mean, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be God here, but
No. Yeah.
teenagers know if you love them or not. And if you love kids, I don't mean in a weird way, but you just love those kids. God has given you a love for them. Then love them. But if you don't, then you better start talking to the Lord and say, Lord, okay, if you want me to work with these teenagers, give me a love for them, because you might as well pound sand than work with teenagers if you don't love them.
Now, it's going to that. Is there any practical tips you have for people that are struggling with connecting with youth? Anything that you would say, this is how you connect with them more in conversation? Because some people just can't connect. They really struggle with it. Anything that you would advise on that? I know you naturally are able to do that, but anything you've seen that you're like, hey, try this, or
Yeah, a couple things. One is get involved with what they are interested in. I kind of stumbled onto this when I was working with the youth group when I was in college.
okay.
I had the high school boys, the juniors and seniors Sunday school class, and they played basketball. And I remember this one big boy, his name was Bubba. Well, that was his nickname, Bubba. And I found out that they had a basketball game. I went to their basketball game and yelled like a nut. I mean, I had a cheered for Sean. You just yell like a nut, and I'm cheering for like, yeah, Bubba, and just the different guys were there. And I even remember moving to underneath the hoop where he was and just yelling and box out and cheering for him. I'm telling you what, that is like that's like it's just like a magic wand kind of thing. You go, be interested in them, interested in what they're doing, yell for them, and that will give you connection right there. I mean, that's it. Or go to their band concert, whatever it is. Go and make sure they know you're there, because that is what will start to win their hearts.
Yeah, I had a teenager one time that I was working with, and he was ghosting me. He wouldn't respond. I'd mentored him for a few years, and then I finally just called him up. I'm like, Tony, what are you doing? I kind of yelled at him on the phone in a nice way, but I said, what are
Yeah.
you doing? And for years, he's been talking about me leaving that voicemail on his phone. I used to go to his games and his football games and yell and be, Tony, and, stuff like that. I love Tony, but sometimes they need you to, be a little crazy, right? and try to
Yeah.
have a little more, a little more craziness with their life. Now, talking to youth pastors and different people that are, they didn't grow up without, the mom or the dad. What would you say to them on how to make sure that they engage with these kids? Because sometimes these teenagers need a little more attention. What would you say to them? Like, how do I make sure I just focus on these teenagers a little more?
Boy, that's a really tough question,
Yeah.
because you and we all have our well, God builds us with a purpose. God builds us with strengths and weaknesses. Um, and so you might say, man, I'm more drawn to the really good kid,
Yeah.
the little always perfect child. And so
Mhm.
you'll have to work more at doing that. But be intentional to pay attention to these kids. And but those kids that have gone through trauma, part of it is, man, trauma is tough. My 5 that I adopted, well, we have a 6th one that came 4.5 years ago. Trauma, it just literally rewires their brain. And so it is difficult to handle these things properly. So ask God to give you wisdom. I can't stress that enough. But also ask your youth pastor, ask your wife, hey, will you, if you see me paying too much attention just to one group of kids, will you point that
Yeah.
out to me?
That's good.
Because if you are drawn to the good kids, and you're spending all your time with them, these other kids they're gonna blow you off, and you will not have a ministry to them. And so have your brain on and go, okay, who have I talked to this time, and try to see everybody.
Yeah.
Man, I just remembered, Sean. You probably don't remember it, but back in the day when I was youth pastor, do you remember the newsletters that we put out? You might not. In one of the newsletters,
Yeah.
I put out a story called Seeing Andy. I got the author's permission. He was a youth pastor, and he talked about this one kid that was kind of a nerdy kid. And he would come in, he'd slip in, nobody ever talked to him. Everybody, all the cool kids were doing their thing. And Andy came in, and he was one of those scruffy looking little kids, just whatever. He was the nerd. And the Lord really kind of put on him to talk to Andy, but he gave opportunity for testimonies, praises. And he said, Andy raised his hand. He was amazed. And he said, I got a bike. And he goes, you got a bike? He goes, yeah, it was a moped. And he said, and after that, he kind of sunk back into the wall, didn't want anybody to notice him. And he said, Andy, I want to go see that. That youth pastor went out afterwards and saw his moped. I don't remember if Andy let him ride his little moped around the parking lot, but the youth pastor got on the moped and rode it around. The nerdy kid that nobody noticed. And he said this kid was so excited, and but none of the other kids noticed him. And the kid said, well, hey, I'll see you next week. The next day, I think it was the next day or two, Andy was riding somewhere, and got hit by a truck, like a tractor trailer. And I'm trying to remember all the details, but he got drugged for a while. And he was in the hospital and in a coma. And he said at that point, all the kids in his youth group were visiting. They were taking him cards, taking him flowers, all of that. Well, Andy died. And he talked about what a lesson that was to his whole youth group. And he said, no longer will an Andy not be seen in our youth group. Wow. And so the intentionality of that, man, that struck me. And God used that, never let an Andy go unseen. And so when it comes into youth meeting, I try to look out for that nerdy kid, because here's the deal. When the beautiful girl or the athletic guy comes in, they're not going to have to worry about attention. Everybody's talking to them. Yeah. But if you, the youth pastor, sometimes maybe even walk past the athlete to go talk to the nerd, that gives the nerd a little more, like, maybe I shouldn't say status, but it gives them a little worth, and just have it where you're going, I will never let a kid in my youth group go unseen. And you see that kid, and and then just ask God to lead you and do all you can to impact that kid's life.
Well, I think what you're saying too, because I mean, honestly, when I was in 7th grade, I felt like an outcast at our school. I was one of the only divorced kids, families, and all the other kids are intact, and a lot of them they came from what I thought rich. I thought they were rich, but I came from a very low income family, living with my grandma. My mom's living at another house with another guy, and my sister and brother were living there. Actually, my brother had already moved to Las Vegas, but our family was a mess. And you guys, you were very intentional, saying, hey, I care about these kids. And you would just do small things, like you took me camping for the first time. I'd never been camping before. So as a youth pastor, not being afraid to take them on things you like to do, because you like to go camping. And I didn't know what camping was. I mean, I grew up in the city part of where we are. And so that wasn't a thing for me, but I went, and it was fun. I got to eat food around the fire and eat and sleep in a tent, go to the bathroom in the woods. And we're not going to get into that, but just
learn how to do that.
Yeah, things I never did. And then even before that, we went through a mud pit with your truck. And these are core memories that I have, great memories, stuff I never would have done if you wouldn't have invited me to go along. And to be honest, I was at the verge of, I was trying to, get my mom to let me go to the high school, the local public school. I wanted to go play football, But I think having you, and then the next year I met my future wife, and different things pulled me back into the Christian school. But I had enough pull with my mom. She didn't even live in the house. I would have just been like, I'm going to public school, forget it. And I would have been out of there. So I think that your intentionality saying, I'm going to focus on this kid because I didn't really have a lot of friends in my class. A lot of the kids I was friends with left and went to public school. And so you came at a crucial time. And I don't even know how much how crucial it was, but crucial time, because I was kind of the outcast kid that, everybody was kind of throwaway Sean, right? It was just, this kid that everybody warned the next year's teacher about. And, you internalize that. But then when you have somebody saying, hey, come work on my truck with me and come camping or come to my house, I know I have 5 kids, come that you added so much value to my life that it was like, hey, I'm part of a family now. There was other people in the church that cared about me, but you were really intentional. And so I think you laid a foundation. The way I look at it in my mind is you laid a foundation during those 7th, 8th, 9th, whenever you were a youth pastor, that if I wouldn't have had that foundation, I think I would have cracked, crumbled, fallen apart, and I wouldn't be in ministry today. I would have I don't know where. I probably would have, gone to public school, started drinking, I probably would have went down the path of my dad, alcoholism. Honestly, that's why I think I would have, but God had a different plan, and he used you to pour into my life. And so I think that it's so important to pour into those kids that are just going to fall through the cracks, right? I think what you're saying is so true, because I was one of those kids that could have happened. I had a big personality. I wasn't one of the ones that was going to be quiet, but I was allowed to overcompensate for my hurt inside. And so I think that, anything else to add to that? We have about 6 minutes left. Anything else to add?
Okay. Well, and anything that you can learn about trauma, and even, think about this. When you see a kid walk in, a guy, he's walking in like being a big tough dude, and sometimes just like, I want to go get away from him. But understand, maybe speak teenager. Go, okay, the kid is a punk, but why is he acting that way? Yeah. Because usually when you see somebody coming in and they're over exaggerating something, they're hiding something. That quite often you see a cocky kid walk in, there's hurt in the background. There's something super insecure about. And so to hide that insecurity, they're being super cocky. Or a girl that is over the top concerned about her looks. There's some insecurity there. And so ask God to help you and understand that, because when you see the cocky punk or whatever, you just want to forget you, man. But understand there's a root under that is causing that. So look past the junk to try to minister to that kid. This keeps hitting my head. I think the Lord may be hitting me with this too. Like Sean talks about, me taking you camping. Do not go taking a teenager off by yourself.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
Oh man, you are asking.
It was a group setting, camping. Yeah.
Yes. Always a group setting, because I said this. I've come across this. If you're off by yourself, with a teenager or something, it opens you up for either accusation or temptation. And you need to stay away from both of those. You don't need to be off. I just read an article yesterday about some guy that is the girl's 28, but she came and he sexually molested her and did whatever. And they would go on 4-wheeler rides. Don't do that stupid stuff, because the lives you can destroy. I mean, not just that kid, but generations of people, because you go doing something stupid like that feels good in the moment, and then it affects that person and their children and their grandchildren, and so do not be alone with kids. I can't stress that enough. Be intentional about ministering to these kids. Be intentional about staying away from accusation and temptation, and let God lead you. And man, the ministry, the impact you can have on a kid's life is just only eternity will tell. But don't be an idiot.
Yes, exactly. That's so good. I really appreciate that. We got to wrap up. I want you to tell, you're not just a pastor, you're not just a fill-in youth pastor right now, but you have a ministry that I want to let you highlight real quick. Salted Springs Youth Ranch, and tell us about that and tell us what you do with that.
Okay. We have kids come up to our house, and we take horses and kids and put them together and minister to kids through that, because like a horse, they don't care what kind of clothes you wear. They don't care if you're a nerd. None of that. And these kids can form relationships with the horses. I could tell you so much, but one of the cool things is like the horses sense stuff. And I have watched kids where mom has told me the kid's given her fits, and then the kid will be in the arena on a horse, and that horse won't listen to them, won't do what they say, and the kid is frustrated. They're going, Pastor Dave, this horse won't listen to me, and and I'm like, yeah, it is kind of frustrating, huh? And then I'll go, kind of like what you did to mom last night. Yeah, and I have an opportunity to talk to him about that, but at first I'm like, oh, cool coincidence. I have seen that happen over and over and over again. Where just these horses, and they are some of the greatest therapists that God's put on the face of this earth. But we say, and I know I don't have much time, we teach kids about horses, humans, the Heavenly Father, and sometimes some hard work. And
awesome.
We've got a Facebook page, and the salted comes from a guy one time saying, the old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, is true unless you put salt in their oats. And so that's where the salted thing comes from. We want to make kids thirsty for Jesus Christ.
That's awesome. I love it. I love what you guys do. Salted Springs, do you have a website? Salted Springs.
We don't have a website yet. We do have a Facebook page. You can see what we do. I need to get a website going. I'm like techno terrible. And so we need a website, but don't have one. But you can look at our Facebook page, Salted Springs Youth Ranch.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And how can they connect with you? You're on Facebook. Where are the platforms are you on? You don't even know. You don't even know.
No.
He's a cowboy, folks. He's a cowboy.
Listen, put me with kids and horses, we're good. Put me with technology, forget it.
That's great. Well, hey, the Salted Springs Youth Ranch, check them out. Foot of 10 Independent Baptist Church. Look it up on Facebook, and I'm sure you can find them. But thanks so much for being on with us, Pastor Dave. We really appreciate you, and I'm just thankful for what you've done for my life, and I'm just glad to have you. And we're glad to be back in Pennsylvania with you guys.
Yeah, it's good to have you here, and enjoyed this, Sean. Really enjoyed it.
So thanks for being on. We're going to get kicked off here. Have a great day, Pastor Dave. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of Let's Talk About Fatherlessness. We want to now challenge you to take the next step by either starting a single mom community group in your church or with your ministry, or by joining our network of God is My Dad churches and ministries. Isn't it a great experience to be able to start a single mom community group?
Yeah, and it's just, if you talk to single moms, a lot of times what they'll tell you is the one thing they're lacking is that community, just a group that they can go in and they know there's no judgment. You know, everyone may not have the same situation. Everyone doesn't know what they're going through, but they can go in and they know there's no judgment. And it takes that kind of that restriction and that wall down for them so that they can share and then that they can grow in Christ.
And our single mom community groups are a wonderful ministry. And if your church can start one, we'd love to have you. We can help you get set up. We have the curriculum and all the resources you need. If you can't start one, we'd love to have you start by joining our network of churches and ministries, our God is My Dad network of churches and ministries, where you can get your church or your ministry on our map, and people can find you and find your ministry in your church so that they can get plugged into your church or ministry locally. So check that out. You can find all these resources at lifefactors.org. We have books, we have all kinds of content on there at lifefactors.org. Check it out today.